Hey there, and welcome to another Fluent English Conversation, the podcast where I talk about a different subject in every episode so you can practice your listening skills, learn new vocabulary, and improve your English. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn something new. Remember to check the description of the video where I've prepared a transcript you can download, which you can then use to make notes, to highlight new vocabulary, and to study everything that I'm talking about along the way. Today I wanted to talk about one of my fondest food memories from when I was a child, from my childhood. And to preface this, I guess it's important to tell you a little bit about my family because it's a recipe that my nan used to make, and that the story is going to relate to that. So basically, I have two siblings. I have an identical twin brother, and I have a younger sister who's 4 years younger than me. And we both have the same mother, but we have different dads. Obviously, my twin brother and I have the same dad because we are twins. And so the grandparents that we used to visit every weekend when we were kids were the mum and dad of my dad. So they weren't the grandparents of my sister. So at the weekend, what we used to do when we were younger is my granddad would drive down to come and get us. He would pick us up on a Friday evening and we would go up and visit them every weekend and just do loads of different stuff and spend loads of time with them. Every Friday night, my Nanna, as we called her, would always prepare like the same food. So I don't know if any of your family have the same kind of thing, but they used to have a fixed menu basically. So every main meal for every day was always the same. So on Monday, they always had egg and ham and chips. And on a Saturday, they had sausages and roast potatoes and gravy, as an example. So every single day they had the same thing. And on a Friday night, when my granddad used to come and pick us up, they always made shepherd's pie. And that was always one of the meals, one of the dishes that I always really looked forward to eating, although my Nana was a fantastic cook, so I enjoyed all of her food, to be honest. It was always really, really fun. I always really liked it because they used to pick us up. And one of the things my granddad used to do was that he would always have 3 chocolate bars in the glove compartment. So in the car where you're driving, on the opposite side, you normally have that little storage area, which originally was for your gloves when you had driving gloves. So we call it a glove compartment, and in there he used to put 3 little chocolate bars. And so when we were driving, we would have to give him one, and we would have to, whoever was sitting in the front seat would have to feed him, and then we would have one each, and it was like a little snack to keep us going until we got there and we had dinner. And then when we pulled up, we'd get out and we'd run and we'd knock on the door. My nan would always stand on the other side and be like, "Who is it?" And, we'd always start shouting like, it's us, let us in. And then she used to prepare, as I said, shepherd's pie. Now, if you're aware of this dish, it's a very famous traditional English dish from, a long time ago. And technically what she made actually wasn't shepherd's pie. That's what we always called it. But there are 2 different types of this dish. There is cottage pie and then there is shepherd's pie. Cottage pie was the original English dish, which was usually made with beef, vegetables and stuff like that. But the main meat of the dish was beef. And then shepherd's pie was the Scottish version, which tended to be lamb. And that's why it was called shepherd's pie, because a shepherd is the farmer, if you like, who looks after sheep and herds sheep. So literally shepherd, I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but shepherd, it literally means sheep herd. And herding is when you get the group of sheep together and you move them into a particular place or you look after them. So shepherd's pie. We called it shepherd's pie because that name was what they chose, but actually it was always made with beef. So I guess, technically some sticklers for food ingredients would probably tell us that we were giving it the wrong name. But, I thought the history of those dishes is always quite interesting as well. The dish basically is minced beef, or mince beef, depending on which way you want to call it. And then you would have some different vegetables. So normally my nana would include carrots, onions, some like chopped up potatoes, things like that. And then you would put like a gravy with it, which is like a meat sauce. Gravy is very common in British cuisine, if we can use the word cuisine for the type of food we have here. And then on top you would have mashed potato. and then usually you put it in the oven, it cooks the whole dish, and then normally it makes the top of the mashed potato really super crispy. And then we would always have it with some greens, so usually peas, but other green vegetables, to get all those healthy things into kids. But my nan actually ended up changing the mashed potato because she couldn't really be bothered to cook it every single time. So she used powdered mash. So we have one called smash, which I don't know internationally if anyone else has it, but it's literally like a dehydrated powdered potato that you add water to. And I know it probably sounds really disgusting, but actually it was really nice. And this particular sort of powdered mash, when you put it in the oven, it went so crispy that you had almost like a really thick crispy layer that you could take off the top. And it was just, me and my brother would always fight over that bit, and we would always try and see who could get the most of it. And that was one of our favorite things. So we used to, when we got a little bit older, we would help her prepare that, but it was always really nice arriving on Friday night and looking in the kitchen and seeing it cooking in the oven, and the smell of it. Even now when I smell like a really good shepherd's pie, it reminds me of going there and visiting my grandparents at the weekend. It's something I still like to eat now, and I'm hoping that I can pass that on to my kids as their food memories as well. So it's very nostalgic. It's something I haven't thought about for a long time, but I thought it'd be nice to share one of these traditional recipes, because English cuisine generally tends to be very eclectic. We've got lots of different recipes and ingredients from all over the world. So the sort of traditional English food isn't usually considered to be the best. Most other countries don't really think of England as the hub of culinary excellence, but actually some of those traditional ones I still really like, and I think they can be super delicious, and they're always really hearty and warming. So especially at this time of year in autumn and in winter, it's always really nice to have something like that with gravy and meat and potatoes, and something to really fill you up and keep you warm. And while we're talking about this recipe then, I think it's maybe a nice idea to talk about how you actually prepare a cottage pie or a shepherd's pie, because it's maybe not something that a lot of you have seen before. So basically you get the mince meat, which is meat that's put into like a mincer, as you would expect, and it basically breaks it all down. So it's like what you use to make a burger or meatballs or kebab or that type of thing. So it's the sort of meat that's been smashed up and into little pieces, which I know doesn't sound delicious, but anyway, you take that and then you brown it in a pan. So browning is when you put it in the pan to make the meat go a little bit brown, so to seal the edges. So you brown it in the pan, and then you would add those chopped up vegetables, so onions and carrots and whatever other ingredients you wanted to add, and you would cook those all off, brown them all off so they're all starting to cook nicely. And then what my nan would do she would add some Worcester sauce or Worcestershire sauce, and I'll put the spelling of that word somewhere because it's an interesting place name, Worcestershire, which I often hear people saying Worcestershire, which is not how we pronounce it, but I will be doing another episode about crazy English place names and their pronunciation, so bear with me. But there's this special sauce from that place which she would add because it's got a very strong particular flavour, which was always really nice. And then she would add an oxo cube, which was like a stock cube. So stock is when you take the bones and meat from an animal and you boil them with water to make that kind of meat soup, if you like. She would take this stock cube and she would break it over the top, and then she would add water to it, and that would create the kind of sauce and gravy and stock all in one, and that was all in the frying pan. And then she would transfer that into a baking dish so that it could go in the oven. She would make the mashed potato, put it on top, and then normally you fork it to kind of lift up the top. So what you would do is you get a fork and you run it across the top of the surface to, instead of it being perfectly flat, it has little ridges and bits that are poking up. And then when it's in the oven, the heat would catch all of those little pieces on top and it would make it go really nice and crispy, and you get that kind of crispy coating or skin across the top, which is always my favourite. And then you take all of that, you put it in the oven until it's hot and it's cooked, obviously. And then normally you literally would cut a big section, put it on a plate, make some extra gravy, and then have some greens with it. And it was just a really traditional, hearty meal. I don't often get time to make it now, but I think it's definitely something that I will always enjoy eating, especially when it's a good one. And we're going to leave it there for today. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing about a traditional English recipe and some of my food memories from my childhood. If that's something that interests you, put a comment below the video and let me know what type of food or what recipes you'd like me to discuss, and I can always talk about food because it's one of my favourite subjects. I hope you have found this useful. I hope you've learned some new vocabulary and phrases. And I hope that you have a fantastic day learning English, and I will speak to you very soon.